Hello everyone, welcome back to First Friday Fives here on Go Big Bore or Go Home, where recoil is required. Why? Because we're the house of the rising gun. I'm your host Sean, and I bet you were all wondering if I had abandoned the channel or maybe even bought the farm.
I'm not dead!
Yeah, he says he's not dead.
Yes, he is. I'm not!
But no! I just had a massive amount of off-channel business keeping me busy. It's probably better if you don't ask about it. Wink wink. Please forgive my absence as I reignite the flames that are Big Bore handguns! Before continuing, we would like to send our condolences to Roy Harrell, as well as the rest of the family and friends of the late Paul Harrell. I was a very big fan of Paul's content thanks to a commenter on one of my videos mentioning him. Paul worked to give us honest, straightforward information in a no-nonsense manner that was well thought out. I highly recommend his video on the 1986 Miami-Dade shootout as it's very informative. Thank you for your content, Paul. You will be greatly missed. This month I wanted to discuss 5 big bore handgun cartridges that are on life support. These cartridges aren't dead yet, but without some intervention or some turnaround in popularity, they may disappear. Please keep in mind that all 5 of these have proponents that are currently working to keep them alive and kicking. But for one reason or another, they are lacking the popularity of the .44 Magnum or the big .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. I am making my list from least likely to die to most likely to die based on how easy it is to find a firearm, get a gun modified or built for the cartridge, the ease of finding ammunition, and the ease of finding reloading components. In short, how easily can you shoot it? And there are some cartridges out there that are still around, like the 440 cor-bon and the 10mm Magnum, but they are, for all intents and purposes, well dead. Without further ado, let's talk about these 5 endangered species. Number 5. The .45 Winchester Magnum. While this cartridge is still clinging to life, it's honestly surprising to me that it hasn't died by now. The .45 Winchester Magnum, or .45 Win Mag, was developed by Winchester back in 1977 by tweaking the .45 NACO cartridge that was developed by the now-gone North American Arms Corporation for the Canadians who turned it down. While the .45 NACO had been designed as a military pistol round, Winchester designed their cartridge for handgun hunting and silhouette use. Makes more sense given its power, if you ask me. Despite its appearance, it isn't just a longer .45 ACP. Since the maximum pressure of the round is 41,500 psi, it had to have a case designed from the ground up with a thicker web and thicker case walls to handle it. The cartridge is 1.198 inches, which is 0.3 inches longer than the .45 ACP. Performance with a 230 grain bullet is 1,380 feet per second and a 260 grain bullet at 1,200 feet per second, according to SAMI. But some reloaders and specialty manufacturers have loaded it hotter than that, with the 230 grain going from 1,450 feet per second to 1,600 feet per second. This round is serious business. This cartridge was chambered in several big bore semi-autos as well as some single-shot pistols. The LAR Grizzly pistol was designed specifically for this round. And if you were looking for a gun to shoot this round in the mid-90s, you were in a good spot. You could grab one of those Grizzlies, a Wildy Survivor, or the Automag 4. But that didn't last long. By the year 2000, the Wildy was the only gun still being produced in this round, making it a challenge to find a gun for it without quite a big chunk of change. And in 2011, Wildy production was suspended. Thankfully, it's begun again in 2017, but it still remains the only firearm you can buy chambered in the .45 Win Mag new, and the prices of the used LAR Grizzlies and Automag 4s get steeper every year. While brass is still made by Starline, making it from existing brass is complicated, but doable. Several specialty manufacturers like Aria Ballistic Engineering, Double Tap, Buffalo Bore, and Underwood offer ammunition as well. But the lack of new platforms and price involved in new and used ones makes this a tough round to get into and could spell its demise. Number 4. The .40 Super. If you're a fan of the channel, you'll recall I did a demonstration video on this one about a year ago. The .40 Super is what happens when you make a bottlenecked version of the 10mm auto. Seriously, the .45 Winchester Magnum case was cut down to 10mm length and neck to fit those bullets. The case was then modified for a small rifle primer, and the pressure was dropped slightly from the 10mm 37,500 psi to just 37,000 psi. The result is one screaming hot .40 caliber round that will add 150 to 200 feet per second to any 10mm load. The cartridge was designed by the folks at the now long-gone Triton Ammunition Company in 1996. The idea was to do with the 10mm what SIG had done with the 9mm when they necked down a 10mm case to create the 357 SIG. Originally conceived of as the .40 SIG, they brought the cartridge to Sig Sauer, and Sig Sauer said, pass. To say it was overpowered for practical defense is an understatement, and the energy involved is tough on firearms. And that's where the trouble for this cartridge began. After having the big company they wanted to support the cartridge turn it down, the 40 Super was now fending for itself as something of a wildcat. In order to shoot it, you'd need a gun made for it or modified for it, and keeping in mind the abuse of a 10mm puts on a gun, this is not a small task. Not many were up to it, and while many folks made barrels that would fit in a 45 ACP chambered semi-auto, these days Barstow Precision is the only one I can find that still does. Not to mention that 1 year later, in 1997, cor-bon stole some of its thunder with their 400 cor-bon cartridge. However, given that the 400 cor-bon barely kept up with the 10mm, it eventually died and the 40 Super continued on. The 40 Super lands at number 4 because, while relatively unknown, barrels and heavier recoil springs, among other parts that are needed for conversion, are still out there. Brass is made by Starline, though it is almost impossible to make any on your own. And ammunition can be had from Aria Ballistic Engineering, Underwood, and Double Tap. Still, its obscurity and propensity for beating guns to death may just end up putting it into an early grave. Number 3, the 480 Ruger. Now this one just breaks my heart. The 480 Ruger is essentially a .475 line ball that has had its case shortened from 1.4 inches to 1.285 inches and the maximum chamber pressure dropped from 50,000 psi to 48,000 psi. But it still uses the same .476 inch diameter bullets. While a lot of cartridges trying to add more horsepower than other rounds, this cartridge had a different goal in mind. The 480 Ruger was released in the early 2000s to be an in-between cartridge. For most folks wanting more power for handgun hunting, the next step up at the time was the 454 Casull. And that's like taking a single step from your sidewalk to your roof. Lots more powder, and a chamber pressure that almost doubles the 44 Magnums means you have one of the most unpleasant recoiling handguns you'll ever shoot. And the huge gap between the two is where the 480 Ruger fits perfectly. The 480 Ruger is a big step up from the 44 Magnum in terms of power. It shoots bullets from 275 grains up to 410 grains with ease at Magnum velocities. It will take some very large game and have no trouble doing it. And while the recoil isn't soft...
What the f*** did you expect? A grease down and a shiatsu?
It's far more livable than the 454 Casull or the 475 Linebaugh. On an episode of Max Prasik's Big Iron, Dr. Mark Key's then 17-year-old daughter Amanda took an Australian water buffalo, and she is quite small in stature. She said she didn't notice the recoil of the 480 Ruger from her Ruger Super Redhawk at all, and she was shooting Buffalo Bore's 330 grain solid copper rounds at 1,400 feet per second. That's pretty amazing. Sadly though, in a world where bigger is always better, most folks in the mainstream often overlook this round. In fact, Ruger discontinued making revolvers in it in 2010, but did return them to production in 2013. However, they remain the sole producer of firearms in this cartridge, but any gun chambered in 475 Linebaugh can shoot the 480 Ruger. So there are guns out there for it, but ammunition and brass are getting scarce as it appears most folks are just opting for the 475 Linebaugh. The tough thing challenging this cartridge for shooters out there right now is brass. It's become unobtainium since the unknown virus of unspecified origin hit, and many folks are cutting down 475 Linebaugh brass. While there are some manufacturers out there making ammo for it like Hornady, just one loading, Aria Ballistic Engineering, Buffalo Bore, and Underwood, they are often out of stock. I hate to say I see the writing on the wall, but Ruger is also producing these guns in very low production numbers at the time of making this video. If they discontinue it again, this may be a round only shot by used gun owners who continue to cut down 475 Linebaugh brass. Number 2, the 429 Desert Eagle. Sometimes reinventing the wheel doesn't work out the way you want. If you go all the way back to 1997, cor-bon came out with a cartridge specifically for the Desert Eagle. They took a 50 Action Express brass casing and necked it down to a 44 caliber bullet. The result was a round that generated extra velocity like the 445 Super Mag out of the Desert Eagle, and they called it the 440 cor-bon. But malfunction issues that made the ammunition unreliable spelled the death knell for this round. Well, in 2018, Magnum Research released an improved version of this round known as the 429 Desert Eagle. Jim Tertine worked over the dimensions and changed the shoulder angle, which dramatically increased reliability. The result is a cartridge that shoots a 240 grain bullet at a staggering 1,625 feet per second, which leaves the 44 Magnum behind. It will also shoot a 210 grain bullet at 1,750 feet per second. If you ever wanted a 44 Magnum with increased range and a flatter trajectory without tracking down a 445 Super Mag, this is your cartridge. I have a barrel for my Desert Eagle chambered in the 429 Desert Eagle, and while I did record a video for it, the wind ruined it, and I am currently in the process of refilming. I honestly think that if you want to hunt with a Desert Eagle, this is the cartridge to do it with. However, the marketing for this round has been non-existent, which is concerning since they alone chamber it. Seriously, it's been crickets for Magnum research since its release, which I think is a damn shame. And despite being semi-certified, this round is only made by HSM under the name Glacier Ridge and by Underwood, so pickings are slim on ammo. And if you want brass, the only way I know how to get some is to call Magnum Research and buy it directly. Now, I don't mind doing this, but how many people out there know that this is an option? I've heard you can make your own out of 50AE brass, but I haven't tried this, so your guess is as good as mine. Despite awesome potential, if this round doesn't get more readily available brass and more options for ammunition, then it's going to go the way of the 440 cor-bon. And number 1. Drum roll, please. The 500 Wyoming Express. The fact that this one is dying is something that kind of surprises me. Back in 2005, Bob Baker of Freedom Arms took his idea of a straightened version of the 50AE with a belt at the bottom of the case and made it a reality. He developed a 50 caliber hunting handgun cartridge for Freedom Arms' Model 83. He and brother Wayne owned the company, so this made sense. People had for years been having custom gunsmiths open up the cylinder window of the Model 83 to take a larger cylinder that was required before converting the gun to a 500 line ball. With the release of the 500 JRH in 2004, that did not require a larger cylinder for the Model 83, and this was a way of making their own proprietary cartridge at Freedom Arms. And while proprietary cartridges are nothing new, they opted to do theirs a little differently. With a slightly shorter length than the 500 JRH at 1.373 inches versus 1.4 inches, the Wyoming Express also employed a belt to strengthen the case head and give the cartridge a place to headspace on instead of the rim or the case mouth. With a 50,000 psi max chamber pressure, the performance results were excellent. Most loads would be similar to the 500 JRH and 500 line ball. However, thanks to folks like ARIA Ballistic Engineering and T2 Armory, they are able to push the limits of the round, launching a 410 grain bullet to 1,500 feet per second and a 500 grain bullet at 1,300 feet per second. With extra performance like that, what could go wrong? Brass. This is the Achilles heel of this cartridge. The brass was originally made by Jameson Brass, which went out of business in October of 2011 and liquidated the rest of their stock in 2019. And while the 500 JRH can be made by cutting down 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum brass, and the 500 line ball can be made from 50 Alaskan or even 348 Winchester brass, the 500 Wyoming Express really doesn't have a parent cartridge. I've literally read on multiple forums where people are trying desperately to find a parent cartridge to make it from without any luck. Currently, T2 Armory is making it from 50AE brass, which has this cartridge on life support. To be fair, the word around the campfire I've heard is that Freedom Arms is trying to get brass production going again with another manufacturer to breathe life back into this cartridge. After all, there are people out there with $3,000 plus Model 83s that either haven't been shot in years due to the lack of brass and ammo or had a cylinder made for 500 JRH. T2 Armory and ARIA Ballistic Engineering have made a lot of folks happy by producing ammunition, as they love their revolver and the cartridge that it's chambered in. But Freedom Arms needs to get the brass issue resolved, or we may be talking about this cartridge alongside the 450 Magnum Express before too long. Okay, so let's recap that list before we go, shall we? Number 5, the 45 Winchester Magnum. Still hanging on if you have the money. Number 4, the 40 Super. Only viable with conversion, but it is still shootable. Number 3, the 480 Ruger. A truly great round that may die a second death. Number 2, the 429 Desert Eagle. A second shot at a super speed 44 is not faring too well. And number 1, the 500 Wyoming Express. Without more brass and/or ammo support, don't expect it to survive. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this list. A special shout out to Jason Salvini of ARIA Ballistic Engineering, who worked with me to come up with this list, as his input helped me pick out these 5. Do you agree with our choices? What cartridges do you think are in danger of going the way of the dodo? Leave your thoughts in the comments section, as we'd love to hear what you think is starting to disappear. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, as it really helps us out on the channel. If you didn't enjoy it, we thank you for making it all the way to the end. And remember, go big bore or go home.